I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Allison.
And this is Nerd of the Week, a randomly generated fandom podcast. Generator, can we remind everyone what our word for the week is?
The word of the week is detective.
On brand, I haven't actually looked up detective.
Let's do a little bit of detective work and find the
detective
definition.
Work. A detective is a person, Google says especially a police officer, whose occupation is to investigate and solve crimes.
All right. I feel like a lot of detectives, like in media, are not police officers, but they work with the police.
Right. They're more like PI and like private investigator or like Agatha Christie style old ladies who just happen to look into stuff.
Yeah. Or like Sherlock Holmes. You know, he's got some friends at the police station, but not really a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or Castle, who's just a crime novelist who follows around a detective.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good show. What a throwback.
I love Castle.
Is that what you brought this week?
No, I did not. I have something else. Which I'll talk about in a bit.
Yes. Will this be the week that we do the same thing?
I don't know.
Who knows? All right. Well, I think I go first.
I think so.
So let me take a swig of tea and then I'll get started. Oh, no, I'm out of tea. Okay, I'm not going to.
Oh, no, the worst. How will you do the podcast without tea?
I guess I'll have to go without. It's all right. I think we'll persevere. We'll make it. So this week, I brought Murder on the Rockport Limited from the Adventure Zone.
Nice. I approve.
I take it that's not what you brought?
You are right.
Okay. I kind of thought maybe that would be the one, but I'm glad we picked something different. So, for those of you who do not know what I'm talking about...
The uninitiated.
Yes. You shall now know the secrets and the truth. So, The Adventure Zone is a podcast that is created by the McElroy brothers and their father. The McElroy brothers being Justin, Travis, and Griffin McElroy. They also have a podcast called My Brother, and Me, which you might have also heard of. And if you've heard of that, you've probably also heard of The Adventure Zone. So anyway, they're a family of podcasters. All they do is podcasts. They have like 12 podcasts between all of them.
It's quite impressive, actually.
It is. And they're all quite good, funny, educational, and entertaining.
And completely absurd.
Indeed. So, getting back to The Adventure Zone, it is a Dungeons and Dragons live play podcast. Griffin, in this particular arc, which is called the Balance arc, is the DM, Dungeon Master, and then Travis, Justin, and Clint, who is their father, are the players. So the Rockport Limited is actually the second chapter, is a good way to say it, of the whole Balance arc. They've had one chapter beforehand, which was kind of their initial dipping their toe into the genre of Dungeons and Dragons. They kind of established their characters and they themselves figured out the rules. And now Murder on the Rockport Limited is really kind of getting into it. The premise behind the entire arc is that there are these three adventurers, Magnus, Taco, and Merle. Magnus is what's he called? A warrior? Barbarian?
He is a fighter.
A fighter. He's a big burly human fighter. Taco is an elf wizard. And then Merle is a dwarf cleric. So in the first arc, it was established that they found what's called a grand relic. This was being searched for by the Bureau of Balance, which is the conglomeration and organization that's looking for several of these relics from across time and space that have incredible power, and if in the wrong hands, essentially create evil in the world. Or it's like too much power and people use it for evil. They basically can't be used for good because they're too powerful and corrupting. However, these three have been able to resist the thrall of these relics, and so they were hired by the Bureau kind of almost accidentally they found this out, and they were hired by the Bureau as a result of that to go and find more of the relics and recover them that they can be destroyed. So here we are, starting on the murder of the Rockport Limited. It's 3 a.m. is how Griffin sets up the scene, and they are in their shared room, which just has bunk beds, and it's this really boring kind of dorm. It's 3 a.m., and they get an announcement by the director that summoned them to the briefing room to learn about a new artifact that has been found. So it was found by another Bureau of Balance employee, Lehman Kessler, who doesn't really matter who he is. He's just a guy who works for the Bureau and found this one relic, and he was bringing it back to the Bureau to be destroyed, but he was murdered before he could actually get it there. And so as a result, these guys have to go and recover the relic themselves and maybe figure out what happened to Lehman and why he was killed, but that's kind of a secondary plot as the director pitches it to them. So to get down to the mainland, the Bureau of Balance is actually on the moon. There's a fake moon that they've made the base out of. So they have to be hurtled down to Earth in these clear bubbles. They're like shot out of a bubble cannon into this little, they describe it as a Volkswagen Golf sized clear bubble. So they're shot out of the cannon, and they are basically on course to reach into Rockport, where the train leaves from. Oh, yeah, that's the thing. Lehman Kessler was taking the relic on a train. Oh, gosh. This is all very complex. So, anyway, they end up getting off course because there's a flock of Pegasuses, and they touch down in a swamp instead of just outside of town like their initial trajectory was. And this is our first little mini battle of the adventure. So, if you're not familiar with D&D, it's a game where there are rules, but there's also not rules. It's, as Steph said, kind of collaborative storytelling. Were those the words you used? Yeah. That's a great way of
storytelling.
Yeah. So basically, the DM, who in this case is Griffin McElroy, he kind of sets up the scene. So they are in a swamp. If they don't move on their turn, they get sucked into the swamp and they take damage from that, or it inhibits their abilities. And then he has these little monsters that he's created, which in this case are 3 leeches, and they have kind of set abilities and set hit points and kind of a set strength. So it's the goal of the players, who in this case are Justin, Travis, and Clint, to determine what sort of moves they want to do. So whether that's like an attack move, like Magnus the fighter usually does attack moves because he doesn't have magic, or with Taco, he would shoot a spell at them usually because that's his primary mode of doing things. And then Merle kind of does a combination of both, because he's not a very good cleric. It's kind of the running joke. So they kind of pick what they want to do, and then where the game part of it comes in is that they have to roll a dice to see if what they want to do actually happens. So they kind of go through back and forth like that. There's improv involved with all of this because Griffin then has to respond to what they want to do and how the roll turns out. And he kind of paints the picture as things happen. So, like, as they hit the leeches, he says, all right, you swing through it, and there is a hammer-shaped hole on the leech's head after you hit it. And he takes however many points of damage. So they successfully fight off these 3 leeches in the swamp. They were good fighters and they had good rolls, and they beat Griffin's mini swamp puzzle, which is good. As a result of being in the swamp, though, as I said, if they sink into the swamp, it limits their movement. It also covers them in stinky swamp juice. So as they get into town, the town of Rockport, which is a city on the move, which is just the funniest thing, because in the background, Travis makes this background music of do 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 do.
Is this the place where they have the Tom Bodette joke?
Yes. I'll get to that in a second. But Griffin says, he's like, it's a city of industry, and it's like a informational video that Travis tries to set up with the background music. You know, like one of those old travel videos from like the 80s or 90s.
They're so good.
Yeah. It's just a funny goof. It doesn't have any pertaining to the story. But then they realize, well, we gotta rinse off first. We're trying to go on a fancy train in character. They've decided they're going to disguise Merle as Lehman Kessler so that he can get on the train with the ticket, and then the other two are the bodyguards. So they gotta look nice. They say, we gotta find someone to help us. We don't know anyone in this town. So they look for someone friendly, and Merle says, well, we need someone like Tom Bodette, which... If you don't know who Tom Bodette is, he's an NPR host. He's on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, but he was also in the Motel 6 commercials back in the day.
Leave the light on for you.
Exactly. So like, he's hospitable. He's friendly. So Griffin's like, yes, you see a constable sort of man, and he looks a lot like Tom Bodette. So they go and talk to Tom. And he takes them back to his garden, inexplicably, which is right there where they happen to be already. And he hoses them off with his garden hose. And now they're nice and clean, and they get to go to the train station, where they talk to the ticket taker, who also, suspiciously, is another Tom Bodette, apparently.
Only Tom Bodette lives in this place.
Exactly. It's a town of Bodettes. So they have to go through this ruse of trying to convince Tom Bodette that they are who they say they are, which is Lehman Kessler and the bodyguards. But they have a terrible time of it. They're so confused about who's who. And at this point in their playing of the game and recording of the podcast as well, like they still, I feel like, are not fully remembering who their personal character is, because it's only like episode 6 or something of the Adventure Zone, so like they're pretty new characters still. Okay. Yeah, it's not very far in, so like the people who are playing still have to get into their heads their own character, but then their characters are playing other characters, and it's just this whole confusing thing. But eventually they get their tickets, and as kind of a courtesy for their VIP passengers, which Lehman Kessler was, they get to go on a tour of the high security vault to see where the precious merchandise is. So this is where Griffin sets up how the vault works. It is this, he describes a black onyx cube that is completely built into the floor of the caboose of the car, and once the items are locked into it, it can't be opened again by anybody else except for the train engineer. And in order to do that, he has to have an hour of sustained physical contact with his hand on it. And they make a joke of like, well, doesn't that slow down the luggage unloading process? And they're like, yeah, by about an hour. So that's kind of the setup of how secure the vault is. Literally no one else can get into it except for the engineer after an hour of touching it. They then get onto the train, and they meet more characters who will be playing the game with them. They are the non-player characters, or NPCs, that Griffin will have to kind of act out as well. So it's also a workout for Griffin in all of this, because he has to play every single other character that he wants to be there that are not already being played by his teammates, essentially. So they meet first the engineer, whose name is Hudson, and he talks to them a little bit again about the vault. And he's also going to be locked into his engineer car as a safety precaution, and no one else is allowed in there except for him. They then meet Jenkins, who is the...
Oh, Jenkins.
Jenkins, yes. So Jenkins is the wizard attendant on the train. So he says he does like the drink service, he helps with the bags, and he also can offer entertainment in the form of something called the pleasure chamber, which we will get to in a moment. They make fun of Jenkins.
Mercilessly, if I remember.
Yes. First they make fun of his voice, because first off, Griffin was trying to figure out what his character voice was, so it changed a few times, and so they kept making fun of that. But they had it played out like it was in real time, not just Griffin's brothers making fun of his voices. And then they make fun of his bow tie, which is rainbow and large. And he says, "It's my flair. We're each allowed to wear one piece of flair on Tuesdays." And that also comes in later as well, that he has this rainbow bow tie on. And then they finally make fun of his use of magic capabilities. because he apparently carried all the luggage to the back of the train by himself, and he was kind of mildly complaining about that. And Taco, the wizard, says, "Oh, you could use a spell for that." And Jenkins says, "I can't waste my spell slots like that." Spell slots are part of the D&D mechanics where you only have a certain number of spells. You don't have infinite spells, or else where would the challenge be, essentially?
I appreciate their breaking of the fourth wall where they say things like D&D related stuff while they're trying to act.
Yeah. It's like, how on earth would they know about spell slots as the characters? But yeah, it's good. It's good. So after they make fun of Jenkins and he doesn't like them, they go into their sleeper car and they take a short rest, which is another D&D mechanic, to get back any of the spell slots and hit points that they had taken from their previous little leech battle. After this, they head on into the passenger car where they meet a few other people who are on the train with them. They don't actually meet them at this point, they just kind of notice that they're there. So one of them is a very large and muscular dwarven woman. Another is described as a young fancy lad. And the other is described at first as a trashy wizard. And Justin says, "Now, Griffin, do you mean he's trashy and, like, his robes are all tattered and gross, or, like, they're just kind of not classy?" And Griffin says, "Yeah, like that. He has juicy written across the back."
Juicy wizard! I forgot about the juicy wizard.
The juicy wizard. They're like, "What, are we taking a train to Jersey or something?" So it's a great... Like, they kind of make these things up as they go along, which is a really good part of the Adventure Zone, that they're really good at making these goofs and improvising with each other like this. And it doesn't necessarily pertain to the story at all, but it adds to the entertainment. It's cool and fun. So anyway, after they meet their people, they go back into the dining car, which is where Jenkins currently is, and he's also kind of working on the pleasure chamber. He was actually showing it to the Juicy Wizard. They talk to him about the pleasure chamber, and apparently it's a portal to a room that only has one entrance to it. So that's kind of one of the mechanics of that particular spell. It's only a one-way entrance, and you can't take anything into it, and you can't take anything out of it. Or rather, you can't take anything out of it. Of course, you can take stuff into it. You take yourself in. But basically, anything that's already there has to stay there. And Jenkins has to sustain his concentration on that particular spell. If his concentration is broken, then the spell dies and you're no longer in the little portal. So at this point, Griffin is trying to get them to get into the pleasure chamber so they can try it out for themselves, but they're being, typical brothers and not letting their younger brother have his way. And they say, "No, we're going to have a meal first."
Or just players classically avoiding what the DM wants you to do.
Yes, that too. So instead, they actually go and meet some of the characters that they had just observed before. So first they talk to the fancy lad. They find out that his name is Angus MacDonald, and he's a young 10-year-old boy who's traveling to Neverwinter, which is the city on the other end of the train line here, to see his dying grandfather. And that's kind of his backstory. Then they also meet the Juicy Wizard, whose name is Graham. And apparently his big dream in life is to be an attendant on the Rockport Limited. But he's not very good or skilled at anything, and so he applied for the job but didn't get it. So he's like, "I'm just kind of on the train. I'm shadowing Jenkins, trying to see what he does, so maybe I'll have a better chance." So that's his backstory. At this point, they finally decide to go into the pleasure chamber. Jenkins shows them his garden, which is lush and beautiful, and it's, I think, technically like a greenhouse, so it only has the one way in, which is through the pleasure chamber door or portal. So they can't get out any other way. They look at it, nice flowers, great. Then they come back out. That's the end of their pleasure chamber for now. When they get back out, they go back and talk to Angus, and they see that he's reading a book. And he says, "Hello, sirs. Could you please tell me your real names?" And they're like, "Wait, what? What do you mean?" Because previously they'd been putting on the ruse that they're Lehman Kessler and bodyguards. And he says, "Yes, look, this is my book. It's a book of interception, and I've just received a message that says you're not who you say you are." The message is from one of the Tom Baudettes back in Rockport that they had threatened earlier while they were getting their tickets. And so Angus now knows that they are not who they say they are, but they are not allowed to kind of tell him what's actually going on and who they are due to the magic from the Bureau of Balance, which is this whole other thing that's difficult to explain, but just kind of the premise is it's a very secret organization and there's specific magic that's keeping specific information about it away from other people. Like, they just simply can't comprehend the words when they're spoken. Mm-hmm. So Angus accepts this, and he's like, but I think we should try and figure out how we can help each other, so let's go into my personal sleeper car so that we can talk in private, away from the prying eyes. So they do this. They kind of are figuring out that Angus, he's actually, what his real backstory is, he is the world's greatest detective, the boy detective. And he's been hired by the city of Rockport to catch the Rockport Slayer, who he has reason to believe is on the train right now, since he killed Lehman Kessler already. And so he probably wants Lehman Kessler's goods that are still on the train. They agree with this, and they say, Angus, we think we're, looking for the same thing right now, so let's decide to work together. So they do. They see a shadow go past the door, kind of breezing on past, but they can't tell who it is. And moments later, they hear a high-pitched scream. So they rush out, and they find a dead body with no hands and no head, but it does have a flashy bow tie on it. Oh no, it's Jenkins!
No. Jenkins!
And then also, they find Graham, the juicy wizard, who is fainted next to him, presumably from having just found a dead body. Just then, Angus says, "Sirs, you must be careful. Don't make any sudden moves." Well, they make sudden moves, of course. And Angus has spotted this giant crab-like creature with these huge jaws, like a squid, on its underside that's kind of perched up on the ceiling. And so it's another battle that they have to have, another D&D battle. So they all start rolling and fighting again. This time it's a little bit harder for them, though, because it's, a huge crab monster. It's not just little leeches. And they also don't have their weapons. Those are all sealed up in the vault. They were required to turn them over as a security protocol. Right. So they only have improvised weapons and whatever magic spells they feel like using. There's at one point where Magnus wants to punch the crab through the window of the train, and he misses the first time, and he's like, but I'm so invested in this, so I'm going to use my action surge, which is basically he gets to attack again, to really punch it out the wall. And that time he does, and the crab gets thrown out the window, and this whole time they're going through a tunnel, so it gets ground up against the side of the mountain in the train. However, it shoots fire out of its mouth, and just a few windows down, it shoots itself back into the car, which they're all so mad about. And what's also bad is that with that fire, it has destroyed the evidence of the body that had been there. So now they don't even have the body, which sucks for the detective work. With a few more things, they try and defeat the crab, and eventually, eventually, the strong dwarven woman comes through the door, and she's actually wielding an axe, which, even though she was required to turn it over to the attendant on to Jenkins, really, on the train, it's soulbound to her, so she can summon it whenever she wants. It doesn't matter where it is. So she's able to have her weapon, and she defeats the crab thing for them. At this point, everyone gathers in the passenger car, and they try and figure out everybody's alibi. So, of course, Agnes was with our three main characters in the sleeper car, so they didn't commit the murder. And then Graham and Jess, they say that they were together in the passenger car, and they saw Jenkins go up to the engineer's quarters to perform a drink service up there, and then came through the passenger car for a drink service. And then just a few minutes after that is when Graham went to go find him. He was wanting to go back in the pleasure chamber, and that's when he found him. So everyone has their alibi. Well, they decide, if somebody has been killing people on the train and they've taken the hands, it must be that they're trying to use the hands to get into the vault. So let's go back into the caboose to look at the vault. So they do this. When they get through there, there's nothing amiss. It's completely normal. There's no one in the vault. There's no severed hands or heads on the vault. There's no blood anywhere. It's very weird. However, there is, when Taco casts Detect Magic, the entire room is magical. They also realized that as they went into the vault, there was a sense of like they were no longer moving on a train like they had been. So they step back out of it and they realize, oh no, this is not the real caboose. This is a portal. So they've been transported to like the little demo vault that was back at the train station in Rockport via the pleasure room portal. And somehow that is disguising the real caboose that they now can't access because of the doorway that's being used. Because of that, they now think, okay, we know what's happened, but we don't know who's done it. So they go and they have the whole like parlor scene where the detective is trying to figure out what's gone on. It's a bit convoluted, but basically it sounds like Jenkins went and performed the drink service in the engineer's room. To cut off the head, he actually stuck the engineer's head through a portal and severed it that way. And then he cut his hands off with just a knife or something like that. Or with the crab. Maybe it was with the crab. Oh gosh, I don't remember. I think it was the crab. The crab cut off the engineer's hands. And then Jenkins switched clothes with him so that it would look like it was Jenkins' dead body.
Dun dun dun.
Da da da. Exactly. He then transported the body with the drink cart to the caboose, or well, rather in between the cars where they found the body, and then he proceeded onto the caboose himself so that he had the hands and he could put them on the vault for the required hour. And then he set up the portal so that no one else could get in there, get into the real caboose. They'd go into a fake caboose. They still don't quite know the motive of this, but they know they have to get into that caboose, the real one. There are windows and doors on the caboose, and so they actually end up sending Magnus out a window with a levitate spell.
Oh my.
And he's like flying backwards while attached to a rope. He's rappelling backwards on the train, essentially, to get down to the caboose from the dining car. And when he gets there, there's this like terrible undead meat monster that Jenkins has created as well as like a guard for the area. He is able to defeat that while taking a little bit of damage and breaks into the caboose and from the correct direction. And he's able to find that, yes, Jenkins is here. And so he is able to break Jenkins' concentration. Oh my goodness. Break Jenkins' concentration. And with that, everyone else is allowed to rush in through the real caboose door. They're no longer going into the portal. So it's another huge fight, another big battle. And luckily, everybody is there now. Juicy Wizard, Jess the Beheader, and Angus MacDonald, the little boy.
The world's greatest detective.
Yes, and he has a miniature crossbow that he was hiding the whole time.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. And so they defeat Jenkins. They actually end up throwing him off the train, unfortunately. But they've won. They've defeated him. Yay.
Hooray.
And the vault is open because the engineer's hands had been there on the vault for an hour at this point with them figuring everything out. So the vault is open and they find the item that they were supposed to be looking for, which is a monocle. Basically, it's well, we'll learn later when they get back to the bureau that it's a monocle that would basically transmute anything into what you want it to be, which is kind of, Jenkins's thing with the portals that were an imperfect portal, but with this, he would have been able to, like, actually teleport to places for real and take things back and forth. It doesn't have to be just a closed room. So that was kind of his shtick and why he wanted it. But basically, getting back here, Taco is able to overcome the thrall of the monocle, and he's not taken in by it. He's able to put it into his satchel for later. And also, this is kind of a classic Taco move. He pilfers through the rest of the vault and takes all of the valuables that he can. And he does this by tricking everyone, like, okay, I need you all to go to the front of the train, and I need you to focus really hard on the engineer's car, because we're gonna all create a portal into there, because he's not sure if he can do it. But they need to get into the engineer's car to stop the train, because it's about to crash into Neverwinter.
No.
So, I know. So they get in there. He's actually successful in creating the portal after he takes all the belongings. And Graham, who, remember, his whole thing is he wanted to be on the train. He wanted to be a train man. And so he knows how to stop the train. And he goes and he tries to pull the brake, and unfortunately it doesn't move. So he pushes some more buttons, and then he realizes, like, oh no, this is also, like, kind of touch-bound to the engineer. But unfortunately, in the fight, they had destroyed the engineer's hands as well that had been on the vault. So they're stuck. There's no way they can stop this train. Well, they come up with the idea, what if we sent the train, like, just made it disappear, basically? And the way they're going to do that is send the train through a portal. But if they do that, they'd still be on the train, so they have to actually jump off the train. It's really funny how they describe everyone jumping off the train. They send Angus out first, the little 10-year-old boy, as the guinea pig. And he rolled really good on his dice, and so he didn't take any damage. He sits up and he gives them a thumbs up. After that, Magnus jumps out, and he rolled very badly, and he's also down a lot of hit points from the battle they had with Jenkins, so he's almost dead.
No.
But he's still, kind of alive. I think he has 2 hit points left, they say. So he's able to stay there, and that's fine. And then Jess rolls really well. She jumps out of the train, does like a spin in the air, and kind of lands on her feet running, and then just stops. And then I forgot what Merle and Taco did, but they all survive, which is the point, which is good. Mm-hmm. And then after they're out of the train, Taco is able to do the concentration. There's this big archway that's leading into Neverwinter, and he creates that into the portal right at the last second, and the train goes through it. He makes it go into Jenkins' garden because they hate Jenkins so much.
I mean, valid.
Right. They crash the chain into Jenkins' garden, and then they get rid of the portal, and they save the town, which is great.
Hooray!
And, yay! So they walk on into town from wherever they had been. Angus deals with the police officers, and then they're able to take the monocle back to the Bureau of Balance, to the director. She's proud of them. She's happy that they got it. She has it destroyed in the magic artifact destroying machine, which it's never explained exactly how it works, but kind of spoiler alert, it doesn't work. That's the whole point. She just makes them think that it's being destroyed. Mm-hmm. But that's for a later arc.
Yeah.
And that's the end. They were successful. Yay!
Hooray!
And they get to level up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is what I brought us for Detective.
I approve greatly. The Adventure Zone is amazing. And part of the reason I'm into D&D, Critical Role, Adventure Zone, and Dimension 20 got me into it as a more than just dungeon crawling, rules mongering, and more of storytelling, which is wonderful.
Right. And I'm so sorry if this was kind of a convoluted summary. I think that's kind of the nature of the storytelling, though.
Yeah.
That, like, doing a summary of it is very difficult because there's, like, little, like, offhanded things that people say, and then, like, they actually are a big thing later. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it seems a bit meandering, but it's a really good listen.
Yeah.
Like, if you want some entertainment, it's good. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, if you've somehow heard us first as your podcasters and not the McElroy brothers, thanks. I appreciate it. And then also go listen to them because they're great.
And if you have any friends who also listen to the Adventure Zone or My Brother and Me or whatever, have them listen to our podcast.
Yeah.
As a little plug.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
For sure.
So anyway, I have some trivia, which
all right.
Hopefully it's not too deep of cuts. I hope that you'll know it.
We'll find out.
All right. So what valuable item was Angus transporting in the safe? Was it
his grandfather's silverware?
Oh yeah, you got it. Good job. Yes, his dying grandfather's silverware. He was going to give it as a death day present. And Taco, he stole all of it, but the excuse he makes to Angus is, I was able to save one piece of silverware, and he gives him like one silver knife out of the entire set.
That bit with them harassing Angus is kind of like my favorite thing, and it plays on loop in my head, especially the line, "The memory of my grandfather's name has been lost."
The memory of my grandfather's name died long before I was around. I call him Grandpa. He likes to be called Grandpa.
Uh-huh.
Angus is a star character.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then what souvenir does Robbie, who is their kind of bad roommate that they have at the bureau, so what souvenir does he want them to bring back for him? Do you want me to give you answers for this one? Okay.
I need answers for this one.
All right. Just a simple postcard from Rockport. A silver spoon that they stole from the train. Pringles or Chex Mix.
I feel like it was Pringles.
Yeah, it's Pringles.
Yeah. He had a weird obsession with Pringles.
Yeah. And like later on in later arcs, he gets imprisoned at the Balance because of reasons. And they say, "Hey, Griffin, where's Pringles?" Like they call that by his name. Call him Pringles as his name. Oh my gosh.
Words are hard.
Yes. All right, that's all I had.
Delightful. I love Taz. They're wonderful.
The Adventure Zone.
The Adventure Zone. Okay, so I have a quote for you.
All right.
There is no detective in England equal to a spinster lady of uncertain age with plenty of time on her hands.
Nice. Not entirely sure, but we'll come up with something.
Sounds good. And if you, listener, if you think you know the quote, feel free to tweet at us at, oh gosh, I was going to say the Adventure Zone because I'm so used to hearing them after talking about them. I'm a professional. At Nerd of the Week podcast, you can use the hashtag Nerd of the Week or hashtag NOTWP to let us know what you would talk about with Detective or if you knew the quote.
Yes.
And then I am going to talk about Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Nice.
It is a classic OG film. Have you seen it before?
I have not. I have only heard of it. Actually, mostly heard of it through my brother and me whenever they talk about it. It's one of their more common obscure references.
It is so good. It is filled with visual gags, a bunch of just Easter eggs in the background. It has just constantly making fun of itself, and like I think the reason it does so well is the characters play it straight. So the actors in there, they just line up with it. I don't know how they gave some of those lines without like bursting into laughter every time. But it's amazing. It was made in 1988, and it is a live action / animated comedy mystery film directed by Robert Zemeckis, and is loosely based on the novel of Who Censored Roger Rabbit, written by Gary Wolfe, which I have not read.
Okay. I've not even heard of that.
No, I only found out after watching it, and then at the end there was the credits that was like based on the novel of this, and I'm like, I didn't know there was a novel. Oh. It stars Bob Hoskins, Christopher Lloyd, Charles Fleischer, Stubby Kaye, and Joanna Cassidy. And it is set in a 1947 version of Hollywood where cartoon characters, which are referred to as toons, and people coexist. We follow the main character, the private detective, Eddie Valiant. First, it opens up with a animated series, and it sets up like a cartoon where there's a woman talking to a rabbit, and she's like, you need to watch my baby and make sure he's okay. And then Roger Rabbit, the character, is saying, don't worry, I'll treat him like he's my sister and my sister's sister and my brother's sister, and just going on and on and on about all these different relations of how he's going to keep an eye on the baby. And then as soon as the woman walks out the door, he's still meandering on this logic train as the baby's like, ooh, there's a cookie, and then tries to climb up the refrigerator to get to the cookie with just absurd amounts of hijinks of like knives and drowning, and like the stove says something, oh gosh, it was like a reference to hell, I believe. Like, it was just cracking me up.
Oh gosh.
It was hotter than hell, HOTTERNELL. And there's just like all these visual gags. Every time I watch this movie, I find something else in it. And so they go through this whole thing, and then at the end, something explodes, and the refrigerator like flies up in the air and then lands on Roger, and then he's sitting there like rocking back and forth with like the classic like got hit in the head by something, and he's got like little birds flying around his head. And then the director's like, cut, no, I told you stars, I wanted stars to come around your head, not little birds. And Roger Rabbit's like, what? No, I can do stars. And he bumps himself on the head, and it's like those like swirly symbols going around his head, and he keeps like trying, and he can't get stars to come out of his head.
Oh
no. So you see Roger like going towards the producer, and then it cuts to Eddie, who's happens to be on set, and he's just like shaking his head like, tunes, can't believe them, whatever. So Eddie goes into his name is Maroon, RK Maroon. He's head of the Maroon Cartoon Studios, and he comes in and he's like, so what are you hiring me for? And Maroon says that he's worried that Roger Rabbit isn't performing as well as he should be, and so he hires Eddie to be a private investigator to prove that Roger Rabbit's wife, Jessica Rabbit, is romantically involved with Marvin Acme, who is the owner and like mayor or something of Toontown, as well as the Acme Corporation. And so then proving that Jessica Rabbit's having an affair. So Eddie is a little bit down on his luck and needs money to pay back Dolores, his girlfriend. So he takes the job. He gets offered $100, and he's like, all right, fine. But he has like this strict, like, I don't work with tunes kind of thing. Because you find out in a little bit that he used to work with his brother, Teddy, and it was Valiant, and they were working together to solve cases and stuff, but his brother had a piano dropped on him by a tune and died. So he's very bigoted against tunes.
Oh, no. Not all tunes.
Not all tunes. Actually, I think it was just the one guy, but like, it's fine. So after Teddy dies, Eddie becomes kind of an alcoholic. He loses his sense of humor. He's just kind of a grump. He's constantly seen taking like a swig of, it kind of looks like a Jack Daniels bottle that he has instead of where he puts his gun. It's literally just some alcohol shoved into like a gun holster.
Oh, no.
And he goes to investigate where the performance is, which is a human-only bar, but the tunes are performers. And he meets up with, or he sits at a table where Marvin Acme actually is, and Marvin shoots him with a like a water gun that has invisible ink in it, and it like covers his jacket, and he's like, what, do you think this is funny? And he's like, yeah, I do, look. And then he looks, and then the invisible ink is gone. And in the background, there's two famous ducks, Donald Duck and Daffy Duck, and they're doing a dual piano situation. And I think it's the only time that Donald Duck and Daffy Duck have been on screen together ever. And I still think that's true, which is wild it's just wild to think about, because they're technically two different corporations, so it's the only time they've ever been on screen together.
Wait,
and
what?
Daffy Duck? Yeah.
Wait, who is Daffy Duck? Oh, I'm thinking of Daisy.
Oh,
which is
okay.
Daffy. Wait, Donald's
girlfriend.
I see.
Girlfriend. Yeah.
Okay, no, I'm following now. Okay.
Yeah. No, he's the one who's always trying to foil Bugs Bunny.
Yes. Okay.
And so they're having a dueling pianos thing in the background. And then they don't make it to the end of their set because they keep fighting with each other, and like they end up like hitting each other with piano and like getting him stuck. One gets the other stuck in the piano. And, and then so they kind of get ushered off stage. And Marvin Acme's like, they never get to finish their set. They're always just fighting. And while that's happening, Eddie turns and sees Betty Boop, the old cartoon character in black and white, and he's like, what are you doing here? And she goes, well, ever since things turned into color, there's not a lot of work for the black and white cartoons. And it's the first time you see that Eddie's not like so bigoted against Toons, because he clearly has a relationship with Betty, like they were friends at some point, and he's got like a soft spot for her. And then he asks her a couple of questions. She tells him that, Acme always comes when Jessica's performing. And he's like, got a thing for rabbits, does she? Or does he? And then the stage opens, and then Jessica Rabbit comes out, and she's like this drop-dead gorgeous drawn cartoon character that's like got like the skimpy tiny waist and like this very skimpy long sparkly dress, and she's singing a performance, and Eddie's like jaw drops to the floor. And then he goes, and she's married to Roger Rabbit, and Betty Boop goes, yeah, she's a lucky gal. So she does her performance, and then Marvin follows Jessica back to her dressing room, and Eddie, being the PI, is kind of like in the corner. They do a lot of the like wide shot PI tropes where it's like he's watching something happen in the far distance while he's in the foreground. And then he tries to peek his head in or like look through a keyhole to try to figure out what's going on and take some pictures. And the bouncer, who is like an actual gorilla, like picks him up and throws him out like, stop peeping, you weirdo. And it ends up working out because he lands in the trash right outside Jessica's Rabbit's room, so then he can take some pictures. And he's like, you've got to be kidding me. And then we cut to the scene of Roger Rabbit shouting, patty cake? They were playing patty cake? Say it ain't so. And so they're and then there's like actual pictures of Marvin and Jessica Rabbit playing patty cake, and he's just like there's like 5 or 6 pictures, and he's like going like a picture book, like a flip book. So it looks like it's animated because it's going fast. And then the Maroon director gives Roger Rabbit a drink to help calm him down, and Roger has like a whole like reaction to the alcohol and like classic cartoon, like it's too hot or too spicy or something, and like kind of explodes for a second, and then is like, thanks, I needed that. And then he declares that him and Jessica are going to be happy together, and he runs off, and he's just like very grumpy. The next scene is Eddie going back to his office where he and Teddy used to work together, and that's when you see like all of Teddy's stuff laid out, and it hasn't been touched in forever, and there's a couple of things of like them helping out Toons because there's no justice for Toons anymore, so like they were the people to meet to try to talk to him, to help them out. He falls asleep in his chair, and then he's woken up the next morning by a police officer that he works with that says, I already have a stiff. You got to wake up and start working this case. And Marvin Acme has been found dead, and Roger is the top suspect of the crime.
Oh, no.
So they go to the warehouse where Marvin Acme had a big safe dropped on his head, and they start questioning some characters, and Eddie is walking around like looking at stuff. He spies something to try to pick up, And then Judge Doom, who you know by the name is evil, who is played by Christopher Lloyd, and who just have had so much fun playing this character, comes out, and he's like in this like long black trench coat with like a black top hat and black gloves, and then he shows up and is like, he wants to see if his secret material, dip is what they call it, can actually kill a tune, because as of now no one's found a way to actually kill tunes.
Oh.
And the materials are like benzene and acetone and stuff, so like actual paint thinner is the gag. It's the only way to get rid of a tune is to use some paint thinner on them.
I see.
And so then he says that when Roger is captured, he's going to be brought to justice in Toontown and then dropped in the dip so that he can't murder another person. And then Eddie walks away after Jessica like pleads with him to help and is like, it's your fault all this happened, you're the one who took those pictures, you've got to help me find my husband and help me save Roger. And Eddie's like, not my problem. And then he goes back to his office where baby Herman, who's the baby from the beginning of the show, is actually like a 50-year-old man just stuck in a baby body.
Oh,
and has like this like deep like chain smoker voice that's like, no, the tune is innocent. I've worked with Roger for years. He could have never killed anyone. I need you to go find and figure out what's going on. Like he couldn't have killed this guy, and something's going on, and Judge Doom wants Toontown for some reason, and I just can't put my finger on it. So starting to sow some confusion and misdirection in there. Mm-hmm. So then Eddie goes back into his office where he finds that Roger is actually snuck into his house and is sleeping under his bed, because Roger was like, I figured it was probably good if I didn't wait outside, considering I was wanted for murder. And Eddie goes, well, were you followed? Does anyone know you're here? And he goes, no, I swear, no one knows I'm here. Well, except for this person, because he didn't know where you live, and then this person, because he didn't know where you live, and this person, because he didn't know where you live. And then Eddie tells him to leave and be like, nope, I don't want you in here. You killed a guy. Like, I don't believe it. And then I don't think they're hyenas. I think they're jackals. That I want to call him Dr. Doom. That's a whole nother genre of thing. Judge Doom had hired to like sniff him out and track him down, like knock on the door and are like, where are you? We know he's in there. We heard he was here. And Roger was like, please hide me. And he like handcuffs himself to Eddie. So then Eddie has to pretend that Roger isn't there, so he's like doing the dishes and like has Roger like shoved under the water for a while, and then he like shoves him in his jacket after the jackals leave to go downstairs or to the bar where his on and off again girlfriend Dolores is to be like, I need you to help me unhook myself from this guy, and I gotta figure out what's going on. While they are doing that, Roger, instead of laying low, this rabbit has no self-preservation whatsoever. He instead dances around on the bar for people and like entertains them while Eddie's trying to figure out like the next couple of steps. Then he gets grabbed and shoved into a back room because Judge Doom had heard that Roger had been found, and so he shows up to be like, what's going on here? And asks the patrons of the bar, like, have you seen a rabbit? And they make like this really obscure reference to the Harvey the Puka rabbit, which is like this old play about a guy who saw an imaginary friend. This is a complete sidebar, but I laughed because it was like the first time I understood this reference. And it's this old play about this guy who's a little bit confused about life, and he thinks he sees this imaginary rabbit, and everyone makes fun of him. And then at the end, you find out the imaginary rabbit is real, but the rabbit's name is Harvey, and he's a trickster god. And there's a movie with Jimmy Stewart in it. It's a whole thing. Anyway, I laughed way too hard at this than I should have. But anyway, Judge Doom comes around and then is like, I know the one trick to get any tune to reveal themselves. And it's the dut, 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 dut. And so he just keeps doing the shave and haircut bit around the room, trying to like knock on things. And Eddie's like, who's going to fall for that? And he turns around and Roger's like dying because he needs to say 2 bits so bad. And he busts through the door and he's like, 2 bits.
Oh no.
And Judge Doom like grabs the dip and tries to drop him in there, but Eddie manages to give him a drink of alcohol because we know that Roger can't keep his alcohol down, and so then he kind of explodes a little bit again, and it gives them time to get out and find a car. And they find Benny, which is a cartoon taxi. And so they hop in the car, and then they have this whole crazy chase scene where they're running away from the jackals and Judge Doom and some police officers who are just watching this whole thing and trying to slow them down, and they're getting shot at. And then they show back up to the director, Maroons, who... they find out that he was forced to blackmail Jessica or Acme's. You don't get all of the information, but you get pieces where it's like he was forced to do this to try to get Acme framed for something so that somebody could get something. And right before he gets like a lot of the plot, there's like this gun that comes out around the corner and then shoots Maroon, and then the director dies.
Oh no.
I know. Classic PI investigations. And then there's more chase scenes through town, and then they end up hiding in a movie theater where they can rest and relax for a second, and Dolores comes and brings him some more information, and just a way for Roger to get out of town. And Roger's all upset because the movie theater's only playing commercials and not an actual movie. But it happens to be that classic, like, the TV is playing exactly the information that you need situation where they find out that Doom is the sole stockholder in a company called Cloverleaf, and his plan is to buy Toontown and then destroy it to make a freeway for Los Angeles because it will be beautiful and more useful than Toontown. And their joke is that there will be no more traffic jams in LA, which I think anyone who lives in LA probably can say that there are always traffic jams in LA. Shenanigans continue, and then they make their way to confront Doom and figure out that what's going on and like get the plan. And Roger gets kidnapped again by Doom to go get dipped, and Eddie finds Jessica, who has figured out a lot of this on her own, and then she saves him from like an evil shadow cartoon that was trying to kill him.
Oh, gosh.
And then Benny takes them to the warehouse where there's the last bit of the plan is revealed, where Doom has built this giant dip vat that he's gonna use like this fire hydrant hose to like wipe out all the tunes with the acetone.
Oh no.
And he's kidnapped both Roger and Jessica, and he's tied them up, and he's got them like at point to erase them. Eddie comes to try to save the day kind of thing, and he has this tune gun with these tiny bullets that are all like caricatures of like old Western characters. And he's like, all right, you guys up for some fun? And so like when he shoots the bullets, they like stop midair like cartoon bullets, and then they will turn right and like follow, and then so they shoots those off. And they have the big epic fight in the warehouse, and the jackals are laughing every time Eddie gets hurt, and Eddie realizes that the more he's ridiculous, the less competent they become. So he starts to do more and more antics and like really dumb jokes and tries to rhyme like any normal human off the cuff tries to rhyme, and they're terrible, but it works. And so he's able to get Judge Doom like pushed out of the way, stops the dip machine from destroying Jessica and Roger, and there's like a steamroller in there for reasons, and it rolls over Judge Doom and like smushes him.
Oh my.
And that's when you find out that Judge Doom is actually a toon, because then he's like all flat, and then he like pops back up and then inflates himself with like a hot air balloon thing, and then his fake eyes pop out, and then he's got like a hammer for a hand, and he's like, I bet you're surprised I'm a toon, and your brother was surprised too when I killed him. And you find out that Judge Doom was the reason that Teddy died. So through a series of shenanigans with a chainsaw hand and a hammer hand and like that punch hand with like the spring thing that's like very classic in cartoons, Eddie manages to like maneuver himself around the warehouse so that the vat actually drops on Judge Doom and dissolves him. So he gets to avenge Teddy's death and then free Roger and Jessica and saved Toontown.
Oh, good.
And then he turns on a bunch of fire hydrants, and then they kind of clear out everything, so all the dip kind of goes down the drain, and hopefully doesn't ruin the sewer system of Toontown. I've always been a little unclear on that one, but everyone seems fine, and they can step in like the diluted acetone, so it's probably fine. And then the last scene is there's like a bunch of tunes, and like classic ones like Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Mickey Mouse, like they're all just kind of around and like cheering and being like, well, what's gonna happen to Toontown though, because Acme had the will. And turns out Roger had taken a piece of paper to write a love letter to Jessica. That's what he was doing. He was just trying to write her a love letter and say like, don't leave me, I love you, like we can work this out kind of thing. And the paper that he had written on was actually the will of Acme, and the will had been written in invisible ink.
Perfect.
And so like for whatever reason, I guess invisible ink has a time limit, and then it was starting to like reappear on the paper.
Because that's how that usually works.
Because that's how you wrap up a story in a cute way. And then it ends with them all being excited, and then Porky Pig coming at the end being like, that's all, folks. And that's Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Nice. Sounds like fun.
It's a fun ride. There, like I said, there's so many visual gags in this thing. There's a bajillion Easter eggs everywhere. And just constant references, and probably things that I don't even know that are references. Yeah, the cloverleaf symbol is like literally like a 4-lane turn-off highway. Like the circles, like that's what their symbol is.
Oh boy.
At one point, Roger's giving a shouting about how there's no justice for toons, and he's like literally standing on a soapbox. It's so good.
Awesome.
All right, so I got 2 questions for you.
All right,
so the first one, in Eddie's office, there's a newspaper on Eddie's brother's desk saying they helped save some characters from a kidnapping. Which characters did they save? Was it Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse? Was it Huey, Louie, and Dewey? Or was it Wacko, Jacko, and Dot?
I'm gonna say Huey, Louie, and Dewey.
Yeah!
Yeah!
He saved the nephews from being kidnapped.
Good. Gotta save those nephews.
Mm-hmm. And then my other question, Eddie has a toon gun that he uses at the end of the movie. Who did he get the gun from? Was it Dirty Harry, Woody from Toy Story, or Yosemite Sam?
Ugh, I would love it to be Woody. Is it Woody?
It's not Woody.
Oh no.
Toy Story is actually a little bit too This movie was a little preceding Toy Story.
Oh, okay.
It was Yosemite Sam. There's like a little engraved thing that was like, for your friend, or for my friend, love Yosemite Sam, or something like that. Which is another, like, Eddie doesn't actually hate tunes. He's just bitter and mad because his brother died, which, fair enough.
Yeah.
But it's a fun ride. It's a silly movie. I get something out of it every time. I would recommend.
It sounds like it has a lot of layers. I always thought it was just like a silly movie, I guess, but it sounds like it actually has some good depth to it.
It does. And it is a silly movie. It's a fun ride, but it's not as, like, mind-numbingly dumb as it, like, portrays itself as. Okay. And there's just a lot of good quotes and things like that, and I just don't understand how they delivered some of those lines. Like, the frequency in which Eddie's like, I don't work with tunes, or God, I hate tunes, and I'm like, I would be cracking up all the time.
That's what makes them actors and us normal people.
Us simple podcasters.
So we're allowed to crack up at those lines.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, would you like me to read the quote again?
Sure.
Okay. There is no detective in England equal to a spinster lady of uncertain age with plenty of time on her hands.
I mean, it sounds like something that Agatha Christie wrote, but I can't think of what it possibly could have been. So I've only read The Murder on the Orient Express.
Okay. It is Agatha
definitely
Christie.
Not a lady.
Yeah, that's Perot. This is from her Miss Marple series.
Oh, yeah, that's the name. Okay.
Murder at the Vicarage. But I would totally count that you got it with Agatha Christie.
Awesome, cool.
Let's see. I guess we should ask the generator what our next word is.
Oh, yeah. Generator, what you got for us?
The next word is north.
Perfect.
All right.
Well, we will think of that.
That's a different one. I'm going to come up with something for that. And we'll talk.
This might be a distant pick for me.
This might be a mildly related associated word.
Exactly. Maybe it'll actually be something talking about south. Well, we got that way because it was a direction. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what we come up with.
Fair enough. We'll talk about it next time. And as always, I've been Stephanie.
Wait, aren't we gonna have them share it with their friends?
Oh, you right. Don't forget to share with your friends. That's how podcasts do. Even if you let one other person know that our podcast exists, that helps us out a lot.
Because then they can let people know, and then they can let people know. But remember, it's not a pyramid scheme.
Not a pyramid scheme.
It is not.
It's just a podcast.
Don't make people pay you money for telling them about this podcast. It's not a pyramid scheme.
Only just tell people about our podcast.
Yeah, please. Tell as many people as you want. Alright, so now, as always,
I've been Stephanie.
And I've been Allison. And, I almost took your line. I'm so sorry.
We will get better at this. I was actually going to change the sign off.
Okay.
This has been Nerd of the Week. Thank you, listener, for tuning into our podcast. And remember, this isn't a pyramid scheme.
We'll just always have that tagline there. We don't have to have the disclaimer earlier. That's perfect. All right, bye.
Bye.